300 warships and not a damn thing in the galaxy that can stand against us. Admiral Marcus Halden's voice carried across the bridge, confident and sharp, the kind of tone that left no room for doubt. He leaned forward in his chair, hands pressed against the armrests as though the steel beneath him was an extension of his authority. Around him, officers busied themselves at their stations, yet most wore faint smirks. His arrogance had rubbed off on them, and why wouldn't it? The Dominion fleet had crushed every resistance it had ever faced. Commander Rin Solaro didn't smile. He stood at Halden's side, tall and lean, his dark eyes moving across the endless feed of data streaming in front of him. His voice was quieter, almost conversational, when he said, "They won't fight, not really. Humanity doesn't have the numbers. They'll posture, maybe stall. But in the end, they'll fold." He didn't say it with pride, more like a man reciting the inevitable. Halden gave a short laugh, the kind that suggested he enjoyed being underestimated even on his own bridge. "Posturing makes for good entertainment," Halden replied, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. "Let them throw their tantrum. We'll break their defenses before dinner." His words dripped with certainty, but there was an edge of hunger there too. He wasn't satisfied with winning wars anymore, he wanted the theater of it, the applause from men who feared him. The low hum of the fleet filled the air, a sound that was steady and alive, like the collective heartbeat of 300 warships moving as one. Officers whispered updates, passing messages from ship to ship. The Dominions might fill the void, 300 hulls of steel and firepower slicing silently through the stars. The bridge smelled faintly of ionized metal, the sharp scent of recycled air and heated circuitry. It was routine, comfortable, and so many of them believed it would stay that way. Then Solaro stiffened. A soft ping had broken the rhythm of the bridge, too faint at first to raise alarms, but loud enough to demand his attention. His fingers moved quickly across the console, isolating the source. He frowned. "Contact. One vessel. Human signature," he said, his tone deliberately calm, though his jaw tightened. Halden chuckled without even looking up. "One vessel. Out here. Are they out of their minds? Or just desperate for a quick death?" "It isn't behaving like anything I've seen before," Solaro answered, narrowing his eyes at the projection now forming in front of them. The hologram glowed with outlines and coordinates, but the data scrolling beside it made no sense. No heat trail. No visible engines. It's moving at velocity that doesn't register against propulsion equations. It's just there. The room grew quieter. A few officers exchanged looks, the kind of silent conversation born from unease. This wasn't how enemy ships appeared. They were supposed to crawl into the net of Dominion sensors, predictable, clumsy, and doomed. This one seemed to glide, bending space rather than cutting through it. Halden's lips curled into something between a sneer and a smile. "So they've dressed up a toy ship and pushed it into our path. Maybe it's meant to distract us. Maybe they think tricks will scare us." He leaned back, spreading his arms along the chair as if inviting the universe itself to challenge him. "Fear only works if you've got the teeth to back it up." Solaro said nothing. He just kept watching the strange vessel, his gut twisting in a way his logic couldn't explain. He wasn't afraid easily, but something about this ship felt wrong. It wasn't supposed to be possible, and yet here it was, cutting through their formation like the stars themselves had decided to shift. The human ship stopped. Instantly. No drift, no inertia, no gradual slowing. One heartbeat it was moving faster than anything Solaro had measured, and the next it was perfectly still, hanging before the entire Dominion fleet like it had always been there. Not a single system on the flagship could explain how. For the first time that night, the bridge was silent enough to hear the faint whir of the ventilation systems. Every officer looked at the projection. Every eye shifted toward Halden. And even the admiral, smug as ever, leaned forward with a frown he tried to mask as curiosity. "Explain that," he said, voice lower now, carrying an edge that wasn't just command but the beginnings of unease. No one had an answer. And the silence felt heavier than any alarm could have. The bridge of the Dominion flagship was no longer a room filled with quiet arrogance. The stillness of the human vessel pressed against every officer like an invisible weight. Screens flickered with meaningless data, equations that contradicted themselves, numbers that looped back into nonsense. To the Dominion, every ship was supposed to have a profile. Engines had signatures. Weapons left trails. Physics followed rules. This thing had none. Commander Solaro leaned closer to the display, his hands clasped behind his back. No thrusters, no core output, not even residual particles. It's ignoring mass equations altogether. "Sir, I don't think we're looking at a ship in the conventional sense." His tone was measured. but it carried that restrained sharpness of a man forcing calm over unease. Halden's jaw tightened. It's a ship. Everything's a ship. Some human tinkerer bolted scrap together and covered their engines with some cloaking trick. You're giving them more credit than they deserve. He stood, brushing invisible dust from his uniform, pacing with slow, deliberate steps as though moving would assert control. Launch a wing. I want that relic tested. Strip it apart, burn it, and bring me its captain's corpse for study. The orders snapped tension into movement. Officers barked confirmations, and within minutes a formation of Dominion cruisers peeled away from the main fleet, moving like wolves closing in on an injured prey. The massive holographic display followed them, the slender vessels tightening formation around the solitary human craft. Solaro's fingers drummed against the console, his composure fraying just slightly. With respect, Admiral, if we underestimate this thing we may expose. Halden cut him off with a sharp look. Underestimate? Look around you, Solaro. 300 warships. We've destroyed whole civilizations with half this strength. If a lone ship rattles you, maybe you should request a transfer to logistics where the only enemy is paperwork. He smirked, some of the bridge crew chuckling nervously with him, but Solaro didn't share in the joke. The Dominion squadron surrounded the human vessel, forming a ring of firepower. Warnings blinked as the lead ship charged weapons, ready to test the stranger with a volley. The bridge grew quiet again. Every officer watched, breath held, as the Dominion unleashed a storm of energy across the void. The human ship didn't move. The blast hit it head-on, except they didn't. The energy simply vanished, swallowed like water into sand. The Dominion's most advanced weaponry dissolved into nothing the moment it touched the hull. No explosion, no flare, not even a ripple. A murmur rolled across the bridge, officers whispering disbelief. Halden's grin faltered, though he forced it back into place with visible effort. Shields. Some kind of reflective field. Nothing is perfect. Keep firing, overwhelm it. His voice carried bravado, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. The squadron obeyed. More fire rained down, each blast snuffed out like sparks in the wind. And then, one by one, Dominion ships began to falter. The lead cruiser's lights dimmed. Consoles blinked out. Its engines died. A moment later, the second ship followed, then a third, their systems shutting down like candles blown out by an unseen hand. Gasps rippled across the flagship's bridge. Solaro leaned forward, his expression hard, his voice firm. Admiral, this isn't a shield. It's disabling them remotely. They're not even being destroyed, they're being turned off. Whatever this vessel is, it's playing with us. Halden slammed a fist against the armrest. Impossible. No ship can manipulate systems like that. They must have slipped a virus into our fleet net. Lock down every channel. He barked the order, his voice louder now, angrier, as if volume alone could bend reality to his will. Solaro didn't argue further. He just stared at the human vessel floating in the middle of their formation, a quiet predator surrounded by prey that hadn't realized the hunt had already begun. Across the void, on the bridge of the human vessel, Captain Laura Mitchell watched the Dominion squadron shut down one by one. Her crew sat in tense silence, eyes flicking between her and the displays. Evan Ruiz, her helmsman, finally broke it with a whisper. 3 ships down and we haven't even fired. You realize that makes us look terrifying, right? Mitchell allowed the corner of her mouth to twitch, the closest thing to a smile. Good. Let them do the math. Maybe they'll decide surrender is smarter than suicide. Her tone was steady, but her hands were clenched behind her back. The Dominion was unpredictable, and she knew one wrong move could turn intimidation into all-out war. Back on Halden's flagship, the silence stretched too long. Systems sputtered on the disabled cruisers, powerless husks drifting in formation. No one laughed now. The arrogance that had filled the bridge minutes ago had thinned into something colder. Halden's face was pale with fury. This trick of theirs will not last. They will not humiliate us in our own sky. Bring the rest of the fleet into firing range. Solaro hesitated, then spoke, low and deliberate. Sir, if those cruisers are proof of anything, it's that we are already within range. The Admiral's glare could have cut steel, but he didn't reply. He sat heavily in his chair again, forcing composure, while every officer waited, watching that impossible human vessel hover without fear in the heart of their armada. And in that silence, a single thought pressed against them all, unspoken but undeniable. This wasn't going to be simple. This was the kind of encounter that rewrote everything they thought they understood. The Dominion fleet was built on certainty. Every officer aboard every ship had been raised to believe in its invincibility, The sheer weight of 300 warships pressing on weaker civilizations until they collapsed without resistance. That belief had carried them through every campaign, fueled their confidence and turned arrogance into doctrine. But now, as 3 cruisers drifted lifeless in space, that certainty cracked. The bridge of the flagship was silent except for the low hum of failing data streams. Officers exchanged uneasy glances, none daring to voice the question forming in every mind. How could one vessel do this? How could 300 ships suddenly feel like too few? Admiral Halden sat rigid, gripping the armrests of his chair hard enough that the veins in his hands stood out. His face was still carved into authority, but the sweat at his temple betrayed him. He leaned forward with forced calm, his voice deliberate. It is a trick meant to frighten children. We are not children. He pointed toward the still hovering projection of the human craft. This ends when I decide it ends. Commander Solaro watched him carefully. Halden's words were strong, but his tone lacked its usual iron. Solaro had seen fear before, the way it hid behind bluster until it finally broke through. He recognized the signs in the Admiral's voice, though he kept his own steady. Sir, they've shown capability beyond anything in our records. I recommend holding until we understand more. A full engagement could. Could what? Halden snapped, his eyes flashing. Lose us 3 more cruisers? Then 3 more after that? Fear is the only weapon they've shown, and fear is a fragile thing. We break it by crushing them with overwhelming force. His voice boomed across the bridge, and though no one challenged him, the silence afterward made his words feel hollow. Across the void, aboard the human vessel, Captain Laura Mitchell leaned against the edge of her command console, her eyes scanning the Dominion formation. The Dominion's hesitation was clear, and she knew hesitation in a fleet that size was dangerous. Desperation was born from pride. And men like Halden didn't know how to lose quietly. Her helmsman, Evan Ruiz, gave a soft laugh that broke the tension for a moment. 300 ships. One of us. I'm starting to feel like the punchline in a very bad joke. Mitchell glanced at him. The kind of joke that ends with someone bleeding out. Her voice carried no humor. She had seen men like Halden before, too proud to retreat, too stubborn to negotiate. They never stopped until someone forced them to. Ruiz shifted uncomfortably, but his smirk lingered. So, Captain, what's the plan? Terrify them until they write songs about us, or keep scaring them just enough to make them wonder if they should run? Mitchell gave no answer, just a slow exhale as she turned her gaze back to the flagship. She wasn't here for glory. She wasn't here for blood either. She was here because humanity couldn't afford to be underestimated again. Back on the Dominion bridge, Solaro studied the hologram with narrowed eyes. The data had stabilized just enough for him to recognize what he'd suspected. It isn't shielding. It isn't hacking. It's manipulation of spacetime itself. Their vessel isn't absorbing energy, Admiral. It's bending the rules around it. He turned to face Halden directly, his tone steady but sharp. We are not fighting a ship. We are fighting the environment itself, and no number of cannons can win against that. Halden's face reddened. You talk like a philosopher while our fleet's authority is being mocked. Do you want the rest of the Dominion to hear that their admiral sat frozen in front of a toy ship because his second-in-command whispered scary stories about space? Sir, with respect, Solaro said firmly, if you press this fleet into a blind assault, we may not have a fleet left to command. His voice dropped lower, the kind of quiet that cut sharper than shouting. Pride does not shield you from gravity, and it will not shield us from them. For a long moment, the 2 men locked eyes. Around them, the crew avoided even breathing too loudly. Finally, Halden barked the only order he believed could reassert control. Full fleet bombardment. Now. The words rolled across the bridge like a thunderclap. Officers hesitated, glancing at Solaro, waiting for some contradiction. Solaro said nothing. He knew Halden would not back down in front of his crew. Pride had turned into madness, and madness carried rank. Across the fleet, 300 ships began to pivot, their weapons aligning on the single human vessel. The void lit up with charging cores, the combined glow of 100 suns about to be unleashed. Energy built, plasma roared, missiles primed in their tubes. The sheer scale of it was enough to reduce planets to rubble. To unleash it on one ship was absurd, yet here they were. On the human vessel, Ruiz stared at the sensors, his voice tight. They're going all in. Every ship, every weapon. They're about to throw the entire galaxy at us. Mitchell's jaw clenched. Then let them. She didn't raise her voice, but it carried the kind of finality that silenced the bridge. Her crew stared at her, and she added quietly, if they want to see what we've been hiding, we'll show them. In the void outside, the Dominion fleet pulsed with light as it prepared to unleash everything it had. And then, in the instant before fire fell, the human ship vanished from every Dominion sensor, slipping away like it had never been there at all. When it reappeared, it was not ahead of them but inside the very center of their formation. Panic spread through the Dominion fleet like fire in dry grass. One moment they had 300 ships ready to unleash annihilation, the next the human vessel had slipped past every sensor, every scanner, and appeared right in the middle of their formation, like a predator walking calmly into a pen of cattle. On the flagship's bridge, officers shouted over each other, reports flooding in faster than anyone could process. Weapons systems went dark without warning. Thrusters misfired. Navigation feeds looped in static. Entire destroyers blinked off the grid as if swallowed. The hum of control that had defined the Dominion fleet was crumbling into chaos. Admiral Halden stood with his fists clenched, his face pale but his voice loud enough to rattle the command deck. Reform ranks. Seal the formation. Close in on that ship and crush it. His voice cracked at the edges, a rawness betraying the fear clawing its way through his authority. No one moved fast enough. A frigate to portside lost power completely, drifting into the path of a cruiser that swerved too late. The collision scraped hulls and sent sparks flaring through space. Alarms screamed across the feed, but the real terror was quieter. The Dominion fleet, once perfect in its precision, was unraveling in front of its own admiral. Commander Rin Solaro pushed forward, his voice urgent but steady. "Admiral, look at them. We can't hold cohesion. That ship is dismantling us without firing a single weapon. We need to retreat and reassess before we lose everything." Halden turned on him, eyes burning, spittle at the corner of his mouth. "Retreat? Do you want the galaxy to remember that Marcus Halden fled from one human craft? Do you want our soldiers to lose faith in the Dominion?" Solaro didn't back down. His voice was lower now but sharper. "If you push this any further, there won't be a Dominion fleet left to lose faith. Pride won't keep us alive." His words cut the silence around them. Several officers avoided looking at Halden altogether, their hands frozen above their consoles. Halden's face twisted. For a second it looked like he might strike Solaro then and there, but instead he bellowed, "Re-engage weapons. I don't care if you have to route power through the life support systems, bring the guns back online." Across the void, inside the human vessel, the atmosphere was tense but different. Where the Dominion was breaking apart, the humans carried their fear with grim control. The ship's dim lights reflected across the bridge, illuminating Captain Laura Mitchell's tired eyes. She leaned forward, studying the tactical display, her jaw tight. Her helmsman, Evan Ruiz, broke the silence with a nervous grin. "You know, if they weren't trying to kill us, this would almost be fun." Mitchell's eyes flicked to him, then back to the display. "If you think this is fun, Ruiz, remind me never to join you on vacation." He chuckled weakly. "Hey, I like a little chaos. Just not 300 warships worth of chaos." His attempt at levity lightened the air for a heartbeat, and then it sank again under the weight of what they were facing. Mitchell tapped the display. "They're unraveling. Their systems can't adapt, and their command structure is eating itself alive. But that doesn't make this safe. Pride makes men reckless, and reckless men order desperate things." As if summoned by her words, the Dominion flagship sent out a direct hail. Solaro's voice filled the human bridge, calm but edged with urgency. "This is Commander Solaro of the Dominion fleet. We need to speak." Ruiz raised an eyebrow. "Well, that didn't take long." Mitchell accepted the transmission, her tone level. "You're speaking. What do you want?" On the Dominion bridge, Solaro leaned toward the projector, his expression tight. "I need to know what humanity wants. You've shown enough power to terrify 300 ships, but you haven't destroyed us. That tells me you're not here for blood." Mitchell's voice carried evenly, but it cut like steel. "We want survival. We want to exist without being someone's conquest. We don't want your empire. But we won't kneel to it either." Her words hung heavy in the air. On the Dominion flagship, some officers lowered their eyes. Others glanced nervously at Halden, who was pacing like a caged animal. He had heard every word. "You dare make terms with them behind my back?" Halden's roar silenced the bridge. His fury twisted into something more dangerous than arrogance. "They humiliate us and you grovel? No. No, they will learn. They will all learn." He pointed at the human vessel, his voice hoarse with rage. "All ships, prepare to launch everything we have. Missiles, plasma, cannons, if it burns, throw it at them." Several officers hesitated. Solaro's voice cut through, sharp and unflinching. "Admiral, if you give that order, you will kill us all." Halden's eyes narrowed. Then die as soldiers. Better that than live as cowards. The words froze the bridge. Some officers' hands trembled above their controls, torn between obedience and survival. The Dominion fleet began to shift again, weapons humming as systems strained to respond despite the interference. 300 ships, battered but still dangerous, prepared to unleash their entire arsenal on a single human craft. On Mitchell's bridge, Ruiz's voice was hushed, almost reverent. He's really going to do it? 300 ships all at once. Mitchell stood straighter, her hands resting on the console. She felt the weight of the moment, the pressure of a choice that would define more than just her crew or this battle. It would define how humanity was remembered. Her voice was quiet but steady. Then we show them why they should have left us alone. The Dominion fleet lit up like a constellation being born. 300 ships, battered but unbroken, aligned weapons in perfect unison. The black of space filled with the glow of charging plasma, missiles locked on coordinates, cannons primed to unleash devastation. The combined energy could have cracked the surface of a planet, but it was all pointed at one silent human vessel floating in their midst. On the Dominion flagship, Admiral Halden grinned with the wildness of a cornered animal. His voice thundered over the comms. Fire. Fire everything. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who dare stand in the Dominion's path. The bridge crew hesitated, eyes darting to Solaro, but fear of disobedience was stronger than fear of the unknown. One by one, their hands moved across consoles, arming the volley. Solaro didn't look at Halden. His gaze stayed fixed on the hologram of the human ship, his voice barely above a whisper. If they survive this, if they can do what I think they can do, then it won't be our victory or our loss. It'll be the Dominion's reckoning. No one around him dared to answer. Across the void on the human vessel, Captain Laura Mitchell stood with her arms folded, her voice calm though her chest tightened. They're really going to fire. Every ship. Evan Ruiz swallowed hard, his hands gripping the edge of his console. If this doesn't work, we're going to be the biggest fireworks show in history. He gave a strained grin. You think they'll at least put our names on the plaque? Mitchell didn't smile. Focus, Ruiz. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself, then opened them with a look of final resolve. Activate the veil. The Dominion unleashed its fury. Hundreds of beams of plasma, torrents of missiles, kinetic slugs, and energy storms filled the void in a single cataclysmic wave. The sky itself seemed to collapse under the sheer volume of destruction. Every officer on the Dominion bridge leaned forward, expecting to see the human craft shredded into nothing. But the human vessel did not break. The weapons bent. Streams of plasma curved away like rivers redirected. Missiles veered off course and disassembled in silence, kinetic slugs dissolved into dust mid-flight. It was as though the laws of physics had chosen sides, and humanity had rewritten the rules. Gasps erupted across the Dominion bridge. For the first time in his career, Admiral Halden had nothing to say. His mouth hung open, fury and disbelief colliding with the raw terror in his eyes. Then came the second demonstration. The human vessel pulsed once, almost imperceptibly. Space rippled outward, invisible but undeniable. One by one, Dominion ships jerked violently as though seized by unseen hands. In less than a second, 300 warships were hurled back across space, scattered like leaves in a storm. Power cores flickered, engines died, weapons shut down. The entire fleet was left adrift, powerless, their formation torn apart as easily as if it were paper. Silence followed. No one spoke on the Dominion flagship. The bridge crew sat frozen, the glow of dead screens reflecting in their eyes. They weren't officers anymore, not warriors of an empire, just people staring into the kind of power that made them feel smaller than insects. On the human ship, Ruiz's voice cracked the silence, almost reverent. We just scattered 300 ships with one pulse. He let out a shaky laugh. If anyone asks, let's pretend we meant to do that. Mitchell didn't laugh. She turned slowly, scanning her crew. Remember this moment. Not for pride, not for glory. Remember it because restraint is harder than destruction. We could end them. But we won't. Not today. Her tone carried weight, the kind of authority born not from power but from choice. Back on the Dominion flagship, Solaro broke the silence first. His voice was quiet, almost hollow. They spared us. He looked toward Halden, whose face had gone ashen, every ounce of arrogance stripped away. The Admiral slumped into his chair, his hands limp at his sides, his eyes vacant. For the first time in his life, Marcus Halden looked like a man who understood defeat. Solaro whispered, more to himself than anyone else, all this time they hid this. Humanity hid this. The human ship rotated slowly, its silhouette stark against the distant stars. Without another word, it turned away from the scattered Dominion fleet and set a course back toward Earth. No pursuit was possible. No one dared even to breathe until it had disappeared from their sensors. And when it was gone, the silence it left behind was worse than any destruction could have been. Because every soldier of the Dominion now knew one truth that would echo through the Empire: humanity had the power to break them at will, and yet had chosen not to.